Hello there, my friends. All right, so it is a Sunday evening. It's 6:35 here. Yeah, we're getting close to summer. The sun's still out. So we're excuse me. We're going to be talking about the spiritual and mystical symbolic understanding of the Aesir Vanir war in Norse mythology. And we're going to be talking about the question, is this spiritually symbolic? Is it an ancient historical memory that's been placed into mythology? Is it both? Neither? I'm going to be taking a look at it. This is an important question. It sounds kind of, maybe it might be kind of boring or maybe just kind of slightly interesting to you, but it's actually a very important question. And what we find out about the Aesir Vanir War and what it means has very powerful implications on what it is that we're doing with this kind of belief system. So, if you're not familiar with what the Aesir Vanir War is, in Norse mythology, you have all kinds of beings, but among the beings that we would call gods, there are two camps. There are the celestial deities, who in the Old Norse are called the Aesir, and then you have the terrestrial deities, who are referred to in the Old Norse as Vanir. And what happens is that there is a war between the two factions of mighty deities, and it happens early on, and according to the mythology and the history of the universe. And there is this tense but lasting peace between the two, and they trade hostages, which is common practice when you're in a state of détente, when you have a peace going on, but there's still technically a war. What you do is you give the other side a hostage, like a prince, or somebody of the royal family, and they do the same. And that way, that ensures that you're not going to do anything, because if you do something to the other person or to the other side, if you betray the truce, then you will kill one of their royal family, and of course, so. That's assuming that the other side, needs that prince or that princess or whomever it is in order to preserve the peace. So this is what happens, and so let's talk a little bit of history surrounding what people think this is. So. From a purely, historical perspective, from the scholarly camp, there is a theory that this Aesir Vanir War is actually a cultural memory, and that that in prehistoric times they didn't have books and didn't have scribes. Especially if they didn't write things down in book form. They didn't have scribes to write down history, so according to the scholarly understanding, people would tell mythological stories which people were more likely to remember and understand, or over time it became mythologized and it became hyperbolized, and instead of talking about king so-and-so and king so-and-so or chief so-and-so and the other chief, instead it becomes the gods. This is again the scholarly understanding. I haven't said whether or not I accept or reject that. And so what was actual history, according to them, becomes memorialized in oral tradition in mythology. So a lot of people believe that that the Aesir represent the more, quote, warlike Indo-European invaders, and that the Vanir represent the indigenous, peaceful, I guess, I don't know where they come up with that, but the indigenous hunter-gatherer, indigenous people of Northern Europe. And so this goes along with the Indo-European migration theory. So this is important. Now, before I launch into all of that, I have to go back and say, if you want to really, truly understand spiritual truth, if you want to understand how to apply mythology in a practical way in your life, then you have to first examine yourself. And this is where we employ critical thinking. So as you know, one of the big things that I suggest my students do is that they be willing to take a look at and be fearless. In fact, not just take a look at, you should be fearlessly, continuously examining your emotional agendas and become conscious of them. First, understand everybody has an emotional agenda about everything all the time, otherwise you wouldn't do it. You are an emotional being first. That's, when you came out of your mother's womb, you didn't start hypothesizing about the nature of the universe. No, you cried. You had an emotion. That was your first experience. As you grew up, you were an emotional being. You didn't know how to talk. The only way you knew how to communicate was through your emotions. It wasn't until later that you developed this thing called an intellect and you learned language and writing and everything else. So we are that at our core. We are an emotional being. That means everything that we do, including everything we choose to believe, comes from and is influenced by our emotions. The difference between somebody who is emotionally immature, which I think is probably the most important thing to know about somebody, anybody. Somebody can be smart, somebody can be a genius, but they can be emotionally immature. It's their emotional immaturity that either makes them, a destructive person or somebody who won't understand, the most important things in life. So it is important, I want to be clear, that even though we are emotional beings and that we need to be conscious of what our emotional agendas are all the time, it doesn't mean that we have to take action on our emotions. We do have to have reason, but reason has to come second. If reason comes first, if you take pride in being a rational person who doesn't take action on their emotions, then if that is the core of where you take your pride from, then I'm willing to bet there's a good chance you are actually escaping your emotions. You are afraid of your feelings. You're afraid of vulnerability, and so you hide behind your intellect. So you see how the intellect has to serve us. If it controls us, it will try and protect us from those irrational feelings. But in the process of trying to preserve us, to keep us safe from those feelings that we're actually frightened of, then people start to make mistakes. They make false assumptions about themselves, about the universe, and then they start to come to conclusions. And remember, if everything you believe is based on your assumptions, if your base assumption is faulty, every single conclusion that you make on top of that, no matter how rational, no matter how genius or brilliant, it will also be faulty because the assumption is faulty. So we're talking about the historicity of the Aesir Vanir War, and we're looking at whether or not the Aesir Vanir War is a historical phenomenon that is remembered through myth. And your emotional agenda and your assumptions will color how you decide to believe about it. So that's one theory. One theory is that the Aesir Vanir War represents a historical occurrence where the theoretical Indo-European invaders, again this is a theory, the Indo-European migration theory. According to this theory, the Indo-Europeans, sometime around 7,000 years ago, erupted out of the steppes of Eastern Europe and just went in every single possible direction in the Northern Hemisphere and conquered the indigenous people. And they brought with them this belief of the Aesir. And so the Aesir Vanir War in this theory would represent a cultural memory of these warlike invaders coming in and supplanting the earth-based hunter-gatherer religion. So, do you believe that? Is that something that you believe? Does it make sense to you? When you hear that theory that I give to you, does that make sense? Does it give you a feeling of peace? Or does it bother you? Again, your emotional agendas will direct how you're going to feel about this. So, that's one way of looking at mythology. Here's another way of looking at mythology. Mythology is, in this theory, which would not be the theory that you would find if you went into a history class and wanted to learn about mythology. This says that mythology, true mythology, is channeled spiritual information from the spiritual world. And contained within this mythology is information in a holographic form that will, upon the telling of the mythology, will enter into the mind and allow the mind to evolve and to think in certain ways. For those who are spiritual practitioners, they will see in the symbology of the mythology, they will see directions on how to use spiritual principles to evolve. For the layman, listening to the stories of the mythology will stimulate their faith and stimulate their devotion, and it will do all kinds of chemical things in the brain and help them evolve, but not in a conscious way. It will sort of reprogram them and help them move forward in their evolution. So those are the two theories. You can probably guess which one I subscribe to, which is the latter. Now, that is not the rational conclusion. The rational conclusion is that this is probably some kind of historical remembrance that was passed on in mythological lore, but it's actually something that really happened. Makes a lot of sense, but I think it's garbage. And I think it's a theory that is based on a faulty assumption, which is based on an unconscious emotional agenda. Now, I have a conscious emotional agenda. My conscious emotional agenda is that I have a strong emotional attachment to the idea of the gods and the ancestors speaking to us through sacred mythological lore. I have a strong emotional attachment to the idea that this mythological lore has secrets within it, and if we can understand and with respect open up and surgically look at what these symbols are, that they will teach us powerful ways to evolve personally as well as evolve as a species. Now that's my conscious emotional agenda. I'm telling you that's my emotional agenda. Now when, again, if you've got an emotional agenda and you're unconscious about it, meaning that you're not aware that you have an emotional attachment to it, that's when you fall into problems. Because when people deny their emotional attachment to something, that's when it controls them. And then people will say, no, 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 no. I'll give you an example. I got into a discussion, I don't even remember what it was, but I got into a discussion with somebody on my channel, and I can't remember what the subject was. What I do remember is I didn't respond to them the way that they wanted, and I pointed out some problems with their questions, and did my normal thing of, why are you asking that? Here's what I hear in that question. And at one point the person said, well, I'm just looking into it. I don't really need to know the answer. And it was about a really intense subject. You know, it was like the reptilians or something like that. Something that usually people have a very intense, fear-based emotion attached to. And he said, well, I don't really want to know. I'm just kind of, you know, and he sloughed it off as nothing. And I said, I don't believe that. Said, if it didn't mean anything to you, then you wouldn't even spend a second asking me about my opinion about this. And the person said, why are you being so, you know, uncooperative or so aggressive? And I said, because I'm only interested in answering questions from people who really want to know. And if you don't know that you really want to know the answer to this, it doesn't matter what I won't tell you. If what you say is true and it really doesn't mean anything to you, then why do you care about my answer? Whatever answer I give you will be meaningless because you don't care. And I said, that's bullshit. You do care. But pretending not to care is denying how intense the feelings are surrounding. And, you know, point is that if you're aware of the intense feelings you have surrounding it and you're conscious of it, then I can help you. Because then we can take a look at, you know, your part in this, which is your emotional attachment. So, anyway, I don't know what the hell I was talking about. But so the Aesir Vanir War. All right, so let me destroy the scholarly mythology surrounding this, which is that the Aesir Vanir War is a historical memory that's been kept, you know, that's been passed down through oral tradition in mythology. And again, the scholarly theory is that the Indo-European people, these horse warriors, came out of the steppes of Russia and went all over the northern hemisphere and conquered the indigenous hunter-gatherers and replaced their language and their religion and their culture. And this Aesir Vanir War is the cultural memory of the Aesir, who would be the Indo-Europeans, and the Vanir, who would be the hunter-gatherers and all of that. And I'm here to tell you that's nonsense. And for a scholar to actually believe this shows me their emotional agenda and their inaccurate assumptions. Inaccurate assumptions come from unconscious emotional agendas. If you have an unconscious emotional agenda, your emotions will drive you to make an incorrect assumption based on your fear, and then every conclusion you make after that will be incorrect. So this is what I'm saying this is. Now, if you're a scholar, then you have access to things like history and language and mythology in other cultures. And if you are a scholar and you don't have an emotional agenda, you are going to look at all possible options before you make a belief on what you think is going on. So the main problem with this theory is that it first starts with the Indo-European migration theory, which has been proven false in multiple, but it's still taught. This is the thing. It's been proven false, but it's still taught in college. If you go online and you type in if you type in Aesir Vanir War, you'll hear about the Indo-European migration theory. And even though it's been proven false, people still spew it out like fact. But without going into things like, the Paleolithic continuity paradigm, which is a whole other thing. Without even getting into that, I don't even need to do that. All I have to do is go into the Vedic and in the Vedic tradition. So if the Aesir Vanir War is actually something that's connected to Proto-Indo-European religion, then we're also going to see it in the Vedic. And sure enough, in the Vedic tradition, we have the same thing. We have the Devis versus the Asuras. So the Devis represent the Aesir, and the Asuras represent the Vanir. And they have the same problem with each other. The Aesir are constantly trying to preserve the purity, excuse me, the Devis are trying to preserve the purity of the world, and they're trying to hold on to the world. And they do so by fighting and defeating the Asuras. And the Asuras are they're not demons, they're lower level, this is the cultural bias of the Vedic tradition, that the Asuras are the lower level, entities who come from things like lust and greed and all of that. So again, we see between the Vedic and the Germanic represents an older understanding of Indo-European religion. It's not as sophisticated, it hasn't got as complicated, but one of the things is we see an equality between the Aesir and the Vanir. In fact, the word Aesir comes from the same root as Asura, and the Vedics switched it around. Asura used to mean God, used to mean celestial deity, and somehow it got switched to mean terrestrial deity, and we won't get into all of that, but it's the same word. The word Vanir comes from the same word that we have in Latin for the planet Venus. So Vanir equals Venus. In Old English, the Vanir are called the Wanes. In Latin, the root word for Venus is Wen. W-E-N is pronounced Wayne. So the Wanes are nothing other than those connected to Venus. And what is Venus? Venus is the planet of fertility, of magic, of procreation, of pleasure, all of the things we would represent with the earthly realm, as opposed to the Aesir, who represent timeless perfection. So, I wanted to read from the mythological lore here, but instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you, I'm going to do that a little bit later. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to show you from a shamanic perspective how the Aesir and the Vanir work. So first off, let's ask the question, why is there a war? Why do they fight? Well, we know from the mythology that the Aesir Vanir war is the first war. We find this in the Voluspa. In the Voluspa, it talks about the first war. Yeah, so that means that we're talking about the creation of the universe. So if this is the first war, again, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense either if it's something that's historical. Here's the thing. Details in mythology are extremely important. And if you don't pay attention to all of the details, including the names of the deities, this is why I try so hard to find translations for the names of the mythological characters, because if that will tell you everything. It's not, they don't just give names for no reason. They're telling you very specific things. So we're told that the Aesir Vanir war is the first war in the universe. So this is telling you how the universe is orienting itself. And so as things are separating and orienting itself among the gods, you now have these two warring factions, which are, they represent opposing scientific laws, for example. So what the Aesir represent is timeless perfection. And we know this because of a lot of things that are said in the mythology about the Aesir. So the Aesir live in what is called Asgard. Asgard means the guard of the As. As is celestial deity. Guard means fortress. They live in a fortress. This tells you something. As you know, in the 9 worlds there are only 2 fortresses. There is the fortress of the celestial deities, Asgard, and there is the fortress of Middle Earth. Really, it's kind of like the human fortress. Midgard, middle yard, the middle fortress. And so it makes sense, the middle fortress has to be protected because coming into the middle fortress are all the other 8 worlds. Let me see. Yeah, all of the other 8 worlds are bombarding the middle world with their energy. So that makes perfect sense. But why do the celestial gods need a fortress? None of the other beings, and a lot of them are, we would say are perhaps deities. The giants don't need one. The Vanir don't need one. The elves don't need one. Why do these celestial deities? They're the only ones that need a fortress. Why is that? Well, it's because if we look again at the thunder wheel, we see that Asgard is the first realm that comes into existence. So if you're not familiar with how the thunder wheel works, it represents the manifestation of life force energy. Life force energy comes in from the north, and then like a clock, which is why we use clockwise, it goes in a clockwise fashion. And that represents the way life force energy manifests. It also represents things having to do with electromagnetic energy and all that kind of stuff. But so as we look at it, we see it is the first world that comes into existence after the mist home. As you know, the mist home is the least dense of all of the worlds, and that is because as life force energy comes into manifestation, it first comes into this sort of neutral form. It hasn't really, it hasn't manifested in anything specific yet, which is why it's toxic. Which is why if we were to go into the mist world, we'd come apart. It would like be walking into like Dr. Manhattan, it would just explode you. That's because it hasn't solidified into anything yet. That's the reason why Odin is the protector of that, because he's the only one that can go there, because he's actually been taken apart and he's put himself back together, like Dr. Manhattan, if you ever watched that movie or read that comic. So if we go clockwise, the first world that shows up after that is Asgard. So Asgard isn't completely in the physical world either, but it is now beginning to manifest into something. It's the birth of consciousness. It's the birth of everything. And that's why they're the celestial deities, because that's, among the very first things that came into existence in the universe were stars. And so that's why they're referred to as the celestial deities. But because they are celestial deities, they live in as close to timelessness as you can get without, going into Ginnungagap. And so that's why they're so bright and so pure. They have the essence of children. Their mindset is that of children. I don't mean that they're immature. I mean that they're very, children are very pure in their thinking. They're also very intense about their thinking. They tend to be legalistic, and they tend to be dualistic. There's right and then there's wrong. So there's this connection to righteousness and purity and power, all the stuff that we connect with the celestial deities. That's because their essence is that of timeless perfection. And so because they live in timeless perfection, even though they live in the universe and the universe functions within time, they have to protect themselves from time. They have to protect themselves from age and decay and change. And so they put themselves into this fort, this fortress, which is why, when you go to Asgard, a lot of the symbology is bright and golden, and there's a whole thing about gold and the brightness of gold. And we talked yesterday about how in that mythology there weren't any flames or torches. There was just the gold in the room itself was giving off a light, and there's a whole symbology behind that. Gold is always connected to royalty, and specifically to spiritual authority. And so this is why gold is so prominently talked about in the mythology in connection to Asgard, okay, and to the Asgardians, to the Aesir. So that's the Aesir. Now, if we look again at the thunder wheel, and again remember that the thunder wheel represents how life force energy manifests and condenses in the world. Let's take a look and see where are the home of the Vanir in that. They are all the way on the other side over in the west. That's where the Vanir live. Vanir live there. So if we're talking again about the life force manifesting in the universe, then that's a lot farther down the road, which means that they are pretty far away from timeless perfection. Now, they're one world away from the elf home, which is the last home in Yggdrasil before you go back to the beginning, and that represents that that's beyond death. So the closest thing we have to death in the nine worlds would be the home of the Vanir. That's the last stop of human life, of physical life. That's as far as you can go in physical manifestation. You go any farther than that, you're no longer in the physical world, in flesh. You're now gone. In fact, if you've ever done any journeys, if you've ever had any dreams, and if there's, I can remember, this has happened more than once, but I remember we had a dog. This was years ago, 15 years ago. I had a dog, and the dog was in the vet and was old and was sick, and we were hoping that she was going to come back, that they were going to fix her up and bring her back. And I dreamt that that dog was cowering in the west side of the house, and I woke up and I knew what that meant. She was in the west and she was cowering. It meant that she was going to die. Sure enough, she was dead like within a day. So the west is the setting sun, so it represents death, but it represents all kinds of other things. It represents the passage of time. It represents the fullness of things. It represents wisdom. It represents experience. And this is why the Vanir are called the elder gods. Now, again, if we go back to the Indo-European migration historical theory, they're going to say, oh, you see, these were the original gods of the indigenous people. And so when the Indo-Europeans came in and brought with them this belief in the Aesir, then they had to choose between the older gods and the newer gods. Nonsense. It means that the Vanir are deities of time and experience. This is why they are the masters of magic. This is why they are connected to procreation, to fertility. That's why. It's because that's their element. They are the earthly, the terrestrial gods. But they're not inferior to the celestial gods. They're on an equal plane. They both go at it and nobody wins. Because you have these opposing forces. You have these opposing forces within this 9-world tree that they live in. And remember that the gods and the Vanir are both within Yggdrasil. They're not outside of it. Okay? So let's talk some more about this. Now, I've shared this before, but now you'll see that it makes a little more sense. You'll find that people who are politically conservative gravitate towards the Aesir. And they want to see everything, including politics. Conservative thinking people love the Aesir. And you find people who are more liberal-minded are going to be more interested in the Vanir. And that, I believe, has to do with where the energy is placed. So again, if we look at the 8-sided thunder wheel, and we're looking towards the north, the right side is going to represent the right side of the body. The right side of the body connects to the left brain. If we look on the left side of the thunder wheel, that's going to represent the left side of the body, which connects to the right side of the brain. The right side of the brain is artistic. It is non-linear. It doesn't follow the rules of time. And people who are liberal-minded are usually more right-brained. They're artists, philosophers, painters. They don't think linearly. They don't have a black and white way. They tend to be more tolerant, more accepting. They break the rules. And then you have the people who are left-brained, who are right-handed and left-brained, and these people tend to be more conservative. They're into rules, regulations. They believe in the rule of law. They believe in, they tend to be more exclusive as opposed to inclusive. They tend to be more stringent, more rigid in their thinking. They tend to be more intellectual. They're more rational, whereas the people who are right-brained tend to be more emotional. This doesn't happen in a vacuum. Look at this. Now look at who lives where in the thunder wheel. There's no coincidence there. The Aesir are on the upper right side, as far to the right as you can get, and the Vanir are as far to the left as they can get. And then human beings are smack dab in the middle. Okay? So those are just some things about the Aesir Vanir war. I want to come and I do want to read from the Voluspa, because there's some really powerful stuff in here about, I believe it's, we're going to find another reference to human beings, Kundalini, the three centers, and how it is that we become incarnated. And you're thinking, where the hell do you get that from the Voluspa? Well, we're gonna take a look at that. So I'm going to take a break here. I'll come back. Maybe there will be some questions. Again, if you're new to the channel, please avoid just spouting your opinion or saying hello. Please write question so that I know you're asking a question, and I'll be happy to answer it if I can. Please think your questions through. Please write your questions out so that I don't have to try and figure out what the hell it is you're saying. And if your question is clear and if it's intelligent, I will be happy to answer it. In the meantime, I will take a short break and I'll be right back. Alrighty, welcome back. So, let us take a look and see if there are any questions here. Harold Dale, question. Hi Mike, I recently had a vision while doing the Thung meditation. And if you're not familiar with that, you can find that in the Thunder Qigong DVD. That's one of the places you can find the Thung meditation and standing posture. It's the seed sound for Thunar, for thunder, for life force energy. Okay, it says, I recently had a vision while doing the Thung meditation. It was of a corpse woman, assuming Hela, pointing to the southwest. Any thoughts on what this may mean? Well, that would certainly make sense because her domain is in the southwest, the underworld, the unconscious. So if she comes to you in a vision, and that's clearly her, a corpse woman is her, she's saying you got some stuff you need to deal with in your unconscious mind. You got some unconscious issues. So she's saying, come on, I need to talk to you. So what I would recommend doing is facing the southwest and doing the whole breath and posture. You can find those on the free channel, the thunderwizard.com channel. You can find those. And, see what it is that she wants. Now, if she comes to you in the form of a corpse, then that means that there's unresolved stuff. Because remember, she's half corpse and half beautiful woman. If you see her as a corpse, it means that, again, she's actually nothing. She just reflects what's in you. So that means there's something in you that is technically rotting. It's old, and it's not working for you. It's stuff that you need to clean out of your unconscious. And so when that is there and she comes to you being this perfect mirror that she is, what you see is a corpse. If she comes to you and you see her as this beautiful young maiden, it means that you've cleaned that out. But if you've cleaned it out, you don't really need her help anyway. So, she really only shows up when, she needs to help you with something. So that would be my suggestion. Face southwest, do the whole breath, and ask for help in cleaning up. And by the way, it's quite a tremendous blessing. I've worked with her before, and I'm okay right now. But lots of times when I talk about her, I get very emotional because of what an amazing deity she is. Not necessarily the easiest deity, but sometimes she can be extremely loving and nurturing. So consider yourself very lucky. All right. Let's see here. Yeah, no more questions. Jedi Black Knight question. Based on the above, should Venus signify revival and resurrection? No. I wouldn't say revival and, well, I can't say that that's completely wrong because you have to go through the underworld. So it can represent rebirth. I can't say that's wrong, but that's not, that's, if I'm looking at it, birth would be up in the northeast, which is where the Berchtana rune is, and then we go down into the south. The south is a realm of death as well, and then the southwest would be, after death. And then, so there you go. So I guess it would be a place of resurrection and rebirth. So I changed my mind. Perhaps you've hit on something there. Okay, let's see. All right, so Paul Kupare, I'm glad that you're on here. I'm glad that I saw your question. You're new to the channel. I need you to write out questions so that I can see it. Otherwise, I don't know if you're just one of the many people who are just typing in their opinion and saying hello, because I bypass all of that. So please make sure that you put questions so that I can see it. Otherwise, I will miss your question. So let me see if this is a question that I can actually answer here. You say, hi Mike, I saw a falcon perch on a phone pole outside my window. I think it represents an aspect of Loki. Last night I saw the video you talked about Loki. Coincidence? You know, it's not coming to mind that a falcon represents Loki. You know, if it was a coyote, maybe. So, I mean, it sounds like you want to have a connection to Loki and you're finding a synchronous event. I can't say it's not Loki, but that's not my first instinct when I read that. Okay, let's see here. Question. Again, I'm looking for the questions. Donna Marie, question. Does the left hand, right brain disposition actually play into our path, or is it irrelevant? Well, I need to know why you're asking that question. So if you can ask me that question, see, here's what I really want. When I say, like I just said, why are you asking that question? It means that I can tell that underneath that you've got an emotional agenda. There's something that's bothering you that you're trying to work out. Lots of times what people do is they ask me these kinds of questions because what they want me to do is to either pacify them or to justify some kind of thinking that they have. And I don't know what's underneath that question. So I would rather you think about the emotional need for that question before I answer it. Because, you know, again, it's a very general question. Does it play a part? Of course it plays a part. But that, just me telling you it plays a part, doesn't give you any real answer. There's nothing specific in that. And again, as I said in the beginning, we are emotional beings. And if you can ask your question from a place of awareness of what your emotional need is, then you'll be able to better ask me in a more specific way. That question, I don't know why you're asking it, and so I don't know how to answer it. So think about it and maybe ask again. Let's see here. Charismite question. How do you get over the fear of seeing entities? Does seeing them mean they can affect your environment? Can they physically hurt you or move things? Well, again, same kind of thing. Do you see them? Are you telling me that you see entities and they frighten you? Or is it just that you are afraid of the thought of entities and you don't want to see them? So let me know what you're really asking in that question and I'll see if I can help you. Donna Marie, question. I have tried the Hool breath, but I, embarrassed to say, have dentures and cannot connect my tongue to the roof of my mouth. Does it render the practice less effective? Should I remove them? You mean remove your dentures? I mean, if you can. I mean, if you can just take them out of your mouth, why not? Sure, just take them out of your mouth. If you can't take them out of your mouth easily, then don't worry about it. It's not that big of a deal. You don't need to be real legalistic about it. Loki turns into a falcon, Cosmo Joe says, during the kidnapping of Idun. Well, there you go. So now we know. Maybe that was Loki reaching out to you. So thank you, Cosmo Joe, for reminding us of that. I had forgotten about that myth. But apparently, whoever asked that earlier on, Paul Kupari, apparently Loki was reaching out to you. So sounds like a pretty good synchronistic event to me. All right. So let's go further. So now I'm going to read from the Voluspa, which is the speech of the staff carrier woman. By the way, this staff carrier woman, this is interesting. She holds even more power than the gods themselves. She is there watching all of this. She's a giant. She's a giantess. She is like maybe even one of the Norns, I don't know, but she's watching this from the beginning, and she is the one that tells the gods. Odin comes to her to find out what has happened, how the universe has come together. This is the ultimate primal Shakti of the world. And she's talking about what goes on. The vulva, the staff carrier women in traditional times, These were women who had passed the age of conception. I mean, they could no longer have children. So they were middle-aged or older. And once a woman got to that stage, then they became a seed shaman, which means that the gods were able to speak through them. They had visions. It's important to understand the difference between seed and Galder. Galder is what we would call wizardry. It literally means chanting, but it represents the path of the wizard, the wise one, who knows the mantras, who knows the spells, who knows the rituals, all the stuff that I do when I point out and explain, when I read the myths and I pick it apart and I tell you what it means. That's Galder. Being able to do the ritual to change things, that's what the wizard does. The seed shaman does something else. The seed shaman goes into trance, gives up their control of their identity, and oftentimes will speak. The gods will speak through them, and or they will have a vision, and they will experience something. They'll travel out of their body and go somewhere and come back. But more often than not, the staff carrier, the seed shaman, cannot interpret what they've experienced. Either they don't remember what they said, because sometimes it'll be in a foreign language, and they won't even understand it. Maybe they'll hear it, but they won't understand it. Or they won't remember what they said at all. Or when they come back from their vision, they won't understand the meaning of it. And sometimes it's actually frightening to them. And the wizard who practices Galder will say, "What did you see?" And then they give the vision, and then the wizard says, "This is what this means, this is what that means." And sometimes it's a direct message for that person, and sometimes it's a message for everybody. So, there's a misunderstanding. I mean, seed shamanism is really popular, and everybody wants to be a seed shaman. But you don't understand that being a seed shaman doesn't necessarily mean you understand what you're experiencing. You have to have both. You have to have somebody who can interpret what's going on and protect you. The wizard also protects the seed shaman, with their spells, with their chanting, with their rituals, all that kind of stuff. So that's what the Voluspa is. It's the speech of the staff carrier woman. All right, so, and here's what she says about the Aesir Vanir war. She remembers, she's talking about herself. She remembers the first slaying in the world, when Gulveig was hoist on a spear. Thrice she was burned and thrice reborn, again and again, yet she still lives. Hyde was her name. To whatever house she came, she prophesied well and was versed in spells. She was much sought by evil peoples. The mighty drew to their judgment seats, all holy gods to hold counsel. Should the Aesir alone atone the wrong, or all the gods make reparation? Odin hurled his spear among the throng. This became the first war in the worlds. The ramparts were rent in the Aesir stronghold. Victorious Vanir strode the field. Okay? So there's a lot of stuff there. I'm going to go through all of it. All of this is incredibly important. So remember, this is actually not the very beginning of the Voluspa. She goes in and talks about the beginning of the universe and the creation of the gods and the creation of the dwarves and Yggdrasil and all that stuff. And then we get to and the Norns, and then we get to this thing. So what does this mean? She remembers the first slaying in the world, the first kill, the first murder, the first death. This is the first one. Gulveig was hoist on a spear. Gulveig means lust for gold. So again, we have to take a look at what gold means. When I tell you the word gold, you think money. But it had a much deeper meaning. Forget about the spiritual metaphor just, 1,000 years ago when this was written. Gold had a much different meaning. Gold didn't just represent money. It represented elite royal power. Because who was it that had all the gold? It was the kings. even 1,000 years ago, the average person didn't, use gold to buy and sell. They didn't use money. They'd be very lucky if they had silver, but they probably didn't use that. They still bartered for everything. They had cows, and you would trade a cow for something. You trade meat or milk or skins or something like that. It wasn't. It was only the kings who were really interested in having gold, because gold represented power. Now, gold has some spiritual significance as well, because in order for that the old you watch movies or whatever, or cartoons, and somebody wants to see, they bite on the gold to see if it's actual gold or not, because if it's not gold, it won't be soft. That's why they bit on it. If they bit on it and their teeth went into it, it was soft, it meant it was pure. We talk about 24 karat gold or whatever. So in order for that to happen, the gold has to be purified. So you have to, when you smelt it, you have to purify it. You want as pure as possible. The purer it is, the more gold it is, the more shiny it is. So all of this represents, again, the purity of the Aesir. The Aesir represent the celestial deities who live in timeless perfection, timeless purity. So she is called the thirst for gold, the lust for gold. She was hoist on a spear. So think about that for a second. Imagine a big giant spear in the ground, and they stuck her on a spear. It's not the prettiest picture in the world. But we need to understand what the spear represents. Odin, his weapon is the spear. So the Vedics have a word for spear, which you've heard before, and the word is Shakti. Shakti, as you know, represents the feminine power. It represents Kundalini. The reason why it's called Shakti, because Shakti comes from the same English word as shake. Shakti, it's the exact same word as shake, or it comes from the same word. And again, I've said this before, but when we watch movies, we think of ancient warriors with swords and shields. Those were only, again, the generals and the elite. The average foot soldier probably had leather armor, and he had a huge spear. Like huge. I don't know how big, like 10 feet or something. They were huge, very heavy. And they would be in the front line. The guys with the shields and the swords would be behind them, and then the guys in the horses would be behind them. Guys on the front line were just foot soldiers with spears. And when the two armies would meet on the field of battle, the people in front would take their spear and shake it like this. And I don't know, if all you have to do is get a broomstick or some long pole and do that. It starts going wah 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 wah, but it also makes this noise, especially if the tip of the spear is sharp. As it cuts through the air, it goes. So it makes this sound of cutting through air, and at the same time you can hear the sound of the wood going wah 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 wah. Imagine a whole line, thousands, and all way back when there might be thousands of guys standing there making that sound. You can imagine what that would do to the air. It'd be a really frightening thing. This is Shakti. This is why the spear is called that which is shaken. And Shakti represents the Kundalini. Kundalini goes up the spinal column. And oftentimes when the Kundalini is stimulated, they will feel what feels like either the earth shaking underneath them, or they'll feel their spinal column shaking. So Gulveig, the lust for gold, is hoist upon a spear by the Aesir. The celestial gods, they put her on that spear in an attempt to kill her. And then what does it say? It says, thrice she was burned and thrice reborn, again and again, yet she still lives. Hyde was her name. Hyde means bright, but it has the understanding of, I'll write this down here. Hyde means bright, but it has the understanding of famous. So, I'm stopping there because, again, what this represents is gold. This is the lust for gold doesn't mean the lust for money. It's not what it's saying here. It means the lust for power and influence. So this is coming from the Aesir. The Aesir, what comes into, again, we're talking about the universe. The universe is coming into being. And here we have the celestial deities. These are pure. They're childlike purity. And into their realm comes this force, which is the lust for power. And they, being who they are, they want to stay pure. They try and burn it out. They don't want that. They don't, because once you become attached to the lust for power, you become more dense and you become more attached to the physical world. So the Aesir tried to get rid of that. The celestial deities tried to get rid of that. And what ended up happening is they purified it thrice, 3 times. So spinal column, Kundalini rising, being burned 3 times. What do we have in the spinal column 3 times? The 3 selves, the lower, middle, and the upper self. This represents the Kundalini rising through the 3 selves and having all of the lessons. By the time it has come through the top one, it's completely purified. And now her name is famous and bright. Started with the lust for gold. What does this have to do with Kundalini? I mean, there's no coincidence that this is a female, because Shakti is feminine. So let me explain to you what Shakti is, what Kundalini is. People go off about Kundalini and they want to have Kundalini awakening and they think that Kundalini means enlightenment. It doesn't. It is important. It definitely means evolution, and I'll explain that. But, Kundalini itself does not mean enlightenment. And to understand this, I'm going to share a Vedic myth. This is the myth of Ganesha. One of the myths of Ganesha. There are many myths about Ganesha, but this is one of them. And before I get into the myth, what I want you to understand is that Kundalini represents the human personality wanting to express itself on earth. The soul is not Kundalini. When the soul separates from the body, it is not Kundalini. It does not have lust for gold. It does not want anything having to do with this physical realm. It needs Kundalini in order to be trapped in this body, to be trapped in this realm. It has everything to do with birth. That's why it's connected to the mother goddess. The earth mother goddess is Kundalini. Earth has to do with coming into reality. If you know anything about Vedic mythology, they'll say that the mother goddess is made of desire. She is illusion and desire. This is what she is made up of. She wants that. She wants to be part of this illusion and create desire and all of that. So that's what Kundalini is. Now, there's nothing wrong with having your Kundalini raised and enlightened and all of that, but don't make the mistake that Kundalini means separation from the body. It doesn't mean moksha. You have to have the Kundalini be purified in order to experience moksha, but Kundalini itself, its base desire is to be part of this 3-dimensional earth and to be wrapped up in all of the desires of that. Okay? And so, again, you have to think in more than two dimensions in order to really understand this stuff, right? So, the myth of Ganesha. So, this will help you understand the difference between moksha, liberation, and Kundalini. And this has to do with Shiva and Shakti. So there's the god Shiva, who is, he sits on the top of the Himalayas and he's in constant meditation. And in fact, he would never come out of his meditation if it weren't for desire, if it weren't for Shakti coming to him and having the god of desire, who looks a lot like Cupid, shoot his lustful arrow into him and wake him up. He gets woken up because she dances in front of him and fills him full of lust, and he comes out of his trance and then mates with her to create the gods. So these are the two factions. So Shiva is married to Parvati, his wife, the goddess of the earth, and he says, I'm going to the mountains to meditate. So he goes off to the mountains to meditate. Bear in mind, for him, a little while in meditation is hundreds of thousands, billions of years. Once he goes into meditation, he doesn't have any understanding of time. So he's off and he goes to meditate, thinking he's just going to meditate for a half an hour and he'll be back for dinner. And Parvati is there and she's waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting, and Shiva's not coming home. And she gets very lonely and she gets angry. So she is now in a bad mood. I mean, you know that, guys? You ever been that? When you've screwed up and you didn't call and your wife is mad at you, and you walk in the door and you don't know what the hell you did wrong, but you did something wrong, you just don't know what. She's in one of those moods. And she locks herself into the bathroom and she's going to take a bath. And as she bathes, she is the earth, so she takes from her body the earth. And because she wants to be the mother, to create, to nurture, again, to put into the opposite of moksha, she wants to create. She wants to put something physical into this world. She wants a child so that she can love, so that she can relate to, so that the child will love her unconditionally because her husband's off meditating again. So she creates a child out of her own body, the earth, and she names him Ganesha. And now she's in a bad mood, and she goes and tells Ganesha to go sit out and guard the front door and don't let anybody in. I don't want to talk to anybody. I'm in such a bad mood, and anybody wants to come into this house, you kill them. So here's this being that has the power of the Earth Mother Goddess and has the full, complete power of the earth. And all of the other gods are kind of worried at this point because nobody can get past this little kid. And this little kid doesn't know anybody but his mother. He doesn't know the gods. He doesn't even know he has a father. He doesn't have a father. So Vishnu goes and tells Shiva and says, you better come home. There's a problem. And Shiva comes out of his meditation. What? I was only meditating, oh my God, for 700 billion years? He comes home. He finds Ganesha, the boy made of earth, sitting in front of the door to his house. And he says, hello, young man, I need to get in. And Ganesha says, no. You try and come in, I'm going to kill you. And he sees, because he's Shiva, he sees the power that this little boy has. He sees that it's actually the body of his wife, so he doesn't want to harm his wife. What the hell do I do? Tries to talk to him and say, no, come on, this is my home. I live here. Nope, Ganesha's not having any of it. So Shiva goes to Vishnu and says, what the hell should I do? Vishnu says, you're Shiva. What are you asking me for? You're the king of the gods. You gotta take him out. It's your house. You can't let anybody get away with that. You got to do something about it. So sure enough, Shiva has no choice. He opens up his third eye, which is perception, pure perception. And with the fire that comes out of his third eye, he vaporizes Ganesha's head, which is his identity. The head is the identity. Have you noticed that when people get into fights, they always want to punch other people in the face? You know, it's only somebody who's really been trained to know what they do that they go for the body first, because it's a lot easier to kick somebody in the shins or kick them in the nuts or, you know, punch them in the stomach. You're going to get them on the ground a lot faster. You punch somebody in the head, they got a really thick skull. You're going to probably break your knuckles. You could break your wrist. You know, but that's where people want to go. Why? Because they're trying to attack the other person's identity. This is your identity. He got rid of his identity, vaporized it, unleashed a scream that rocked the whole universe, because that was her body. She felt it. She knew somebody had killed her son. And she was now even more angry than ever. She came out and was furious, and she was threatening to destroy everything. And Shiva tried to calm her down, and she said, "You better find a head for him. That is my son, and you better find a head for him, and you better do it right now, mister, or you're in big trouble. Don't come back until you have a head on that boy." So Shiva took the body of Ganesha and found, as it turns out, the head of the elephant for Indra, put it onto this boy's head. So that's why, you know, it looks like a fat man. It's not. It's a fat infant. It's a toddler with the head of a baby elephant on it. That's who Ganesha is. Now he's got the head of an elephant, which represents the earth, but it represents wisdom. It represents remembering. And so now you've got the power of the earth connected with the understanding of Shiva and all of the connections, you know, and we could go on and on. Ganesha is such a powerful god. But the reason I'm sharing this with you is because this is what this is representing. This is representing this Shakti power that is, we would call selfish. If you want to put a label on it, it is selfish. It wants to give to itself. It wants to create for itself. It's not looking to escape. It wants to be part of this world. So here we have the gods are coming into power. They're no longer these childlike infant beings of purity. They are now being thrown into this universe that's now becoming more manifested, and with that is coming the desire to create, the desire for power. The gods trying to purify their own lust for, you know, connecting to the physical realm. They don't want that. They're trying to fight that. They purify it. And so they're purifying the Kundalini, and then it becomes fame, becomes bright, becomes fame. So she lives on. And Hyde was her name. To whatever house she came, she prophesied well and was versed in spells. She was much sought by evil people. This has to do with this. Now we're getting into the human struggle of the fight between wanting to be spiritual and wanting to have stuff and be in the world. This is a problem for the gods because now Asgard has been tainted. It's been tainted with the desire for physical manifestation, and the gods have been infected by this. This is a problem for them. So they say, and so now the gods, now this desire is going from the house to house of the gods, and the gods are doing spells, and they're doing black magic and wanting to be part of this physical reality, and so this is a problem for them. So the mighty drew to their judgment seats, all holy gods to hold council. Should the Aesir alone atone the wrong, or all the gods make reparation? So they're saying, oh, did we do this? Or is this, did the Vanir do this? Should we blame them for this? Because they're the ones that are into this whole time and fertility. They're the ones that are into all this. And I think, and so, you know, it sounds a lot like politics, right? We're going to look for somebody to blame, and then we're going to start a war, which is exactly what happens. And then Odin, who is the highest awareness, the closest to Shiva that we have in the Germanic tradition. It is Shiva. I mean, they have the same name, Ugra and Ug. It's the same name. It's the same deity. We've already talked about that. Odin hurled his spear among the throng. This became the first war in the world. First war in the world. Odin took his spear. Again, what is his spear? Spear represents the Kundalini Shakti. Odin has mastered this. Again, if we look at Shiva, Shiva is the husband, the master. Don't get all PC on me. This is mythology. The master of Parvati, the master of Shakti. He takes his spear and he throws it over the heads of the enemy. This is important to understand. I was just reading this either today or yesterday, and one of the most ancient inscriptions that we have from ancient tribal Germania is, I can't remember the exact what it was, but it was a prayer to the gods, and the prayer to Odin was that Odin would own them. That sounds antithetical to the whole Germanic, freedom and, all that. Germanic people are very freedom-loving. It's built into us. We don't like people owning us, but they wanted to be owned by Odin. When Odin throws his spear over the enemy, he is not attacking them. This is why it doesn't even say, the gods are fighting amongst themselves about who caused all this, blah, blah, blah. And Odin just stands up and he throws his spear. Now, we know that that is what the Germanic people used to do. When the two armies are coming together, the biggest and strongest guy would take the biggest spear and he would hurl it over the heads of the opposing army. And everybody knew what that meant. It meant that we are going to kill you. Our intent is to kill you, but we want you to go to Valhalla. I get emotional talking about it. This is a noble part of our tradition that we forgot. People are so into the idea of Odin and warfare, and they don't understand that Odin, if he goes to war, it is because he wants to preserve those people. It's the highest gift he can give to them. Let me give you a free ticket to Valhalla. Let me give you we would say a noble birth. Rise to the next level. It's all about evolution. It's not about killing and destroying. To connect Odin to that kind of violence it makes me very sad. So when Odin hurls his spear over the Vanir, he is saying, I understand that we must come together and there has to be a conflict in order to purify this. But I am now raising all of you to the next level. May we all transform to the next level. It was the highest, most generous, beautiful, sacred gift he could give. And that's what he did. So represents this coming together of the Aesir and the Vanir represent the conflict that we experience between spirituality and earthly pleasure. That conflict creates an evolution in us. We see the truth. We get purified in that. We see the truth of ourselves. This is why the soul comes down to experience this, so that we can evolve. Odin hurled his spear among the throng. This became the first war in the world. The ramparts were rent in the Aesir's stronghold. Victorious Vanir strode the field. So the Vanir won. The Vanir won the war. It says here in very poetic language here, and it's hard to understand, but it says, in this translation anyway, it says, the ramparts were rent in the Aesir's stronghold. It means that the walls surrounding Asgard had been breached. So, you have this beautiful castle surrounded by this wall of gold or whatever, and there's this big giant hole in it, which means that the Aesir are no longer in timeless perfection. They have to surrender to the forces of time, decay, of birth and death Not they themselves, but that now they're part of this whole thing. They've been trying to keep themselves from all of that stuff. But now the Vanir have said, nope, time, experience, maturity, all of these things are now what is necessary. And we as humans, of course, we wouldn't be able to function without it. So it has to happen. So the Vanir won. They won because, we could say they understood. But what I see in that as well is that here we have the gods of timeless perfection sitting in their castle, protected from all this stuff going on, but they're infected by this desire to be part of it. And Odin just says, oh, fuck it. And he just hurls his spear, because he knows once the fight starts, the Aesir are going to lose, and they're going to have to be part of this whole illusion that we call the universe. This is what the war is all about. So, let's see if there's anything else I want to say about that. Yeah, so that's all I want to say about that in terms of reading that. So, let's take another break, and if there are any questions, I'll come back and answer them again. If you're new to the channel, write question in all caps so I can see it. I'm going to avoid everything else other than questions. So, make sure that I know that you're asking a question, and I'll try and answer it. Anyway, I'll be back in a couple minutes. Alrighty. So let's see if there are any questions here. Okay, so Donna Marie says, I asked the left-right thing because I'm ambidextrous. It was in the context of your describing who is more drawn to the Aesir or the Vanir. So let me go back and look at your question. There's still something to the question. So you're ambidextrous. Does the left-right hand brain actually play into our path, or is it irrelevant? So again, it's kind of like, I don't know why you're asking me that question, because you already know whether or not you are, where you're more connected. I get it that you're ambidextrous. But you know whether you're more attracted to the Aesir or the Vanir, or if you're somewhere in the middle. So, this is it's symbolic. It tends to be true. It tends to be, I'm very right-handed. So as you know, there's a lot of me that would fall into that left brain category, but I've done a lot of work on myself, and for whatever other reason, I'm kind of in the middle. So, it's a spectrum. I wouldn't take it all that seriously, applying it to yourself, bottom line is. Thank you for letting me know why you're asking that question. Okay, so let's see here. Tamu Ingina question. In your spiritual practice, Michael, do you use oracle or tarot? Oracle outside of runes. If so, what type? Thank you. I use, I will sometimes do tarot readings. I don't know how to read tarot cards. I may go online and do one. Sometimes tarot is, in my experience, and knowing almost nothing about tarot, understand that. My experience with tarot is that it's really good for, asking, more mundane things about relationships and that sort of thing, and looking at yourself. Runes, for me, I do use them for divination, but the runes, again, they're more, it's kind of like the Aesir. They're timeless, and they're very intense and powerful, and they tend to not talk a whole hell of a lot about what's going to happen tomorrow or the next day. It's more about when you do the runes are telling you what you need to do to get yourself aligned. And that's because that's my skill set. That's what I do most often. So I don't have any other tools that I use besides runes, really, to answer your question. Thank you for the question. Let's see here. Okay, so Fleshman Adventures, I can see that you're asking a question. Please make sure that I see it. Put question up there so I can see it. Put question marks so I know you're asking a question. Otherwise, I'm going to pass it by, because a lot of people are on this thing talking. So maybe you're new to the channel, but I need that. Otherwise, I can't tell if you're asking a question. So assuming this is for me, Fleshman's Adventures says, can I still gain respect from Thor and Odin if I believe in other non-monotheistic, you mean other polytheist religions? I mostly worship the Old Norse gods, but also feel connections to other gods from other cultures. So you just saw me give you a whole mythology about Ganesha and Shiva. Obviously, I work with those deities as well. So the answer is, follow your instincts. Look, the gods are not prejudice. The only people that would tell you is that you can't worship other gods are ignorant people who have some kind of, exclusive, bigoted, even if they're not, super bigoted, if they got some kind of, no, you can only do our thing. And we're talking about childish thinking here. And the gods don't function like that. I've worked with, I've done worked with my African teachers, and the African gods, I felt welcomed by them. They didn't see me as anything other than somebody who was following the path. I've had no problem working with Taoist deities. I've had no problem definitely had no problem with the Hindu deities, because it's the same Indo-European tradition. I mean, the gods don't see things. They don't see that. It doesn't mean that there isn't an ethnic connection. It doesn't mean that that's not there. But that doesn't prevent you from connecting to their energies. The way that you know that you've been called by a certain power is that you feel a connection to them. And I know for a fact, not only from people that I've worked with, but other people are out there. There are people that have no Germanic blood in them, and Odin appears to them, and they're rune masters. Odin's, got them to the runes. So Odin, for sure, definitely has no ethnic preference. So don't worry about it. Oak Tree 69 question, could you explain why some people are drawn to silver rather than gold? Why some people? I don't know. Again, it's kind of like, why are you asking that question? How is that question going to help you? I mean, listen, there's a lot of symbology in here. We're talking about gold and silver, and we're talking about right hand and left hand, and it's understandable you guys are thinking about it, but you're getting a little too, you're getting too superficial about it. Whether somebody's drawn to silver or gold, maybe there's a meaning to it, maybe there isn't, but I wouldn't know why that is. I can tell you an interesting thing now about that, is that, and the reason I find this interesting is, again, because I find it ironic that the people who are running the world now, 2,000 years ago, were the most primitive minority in the whole world, and that was, Northern Europeans. Northern Europeans were seen by the Greeks and the Romans and the North Africans and the Egyptians, the people who were running the world back then. The Northern European people were seen the same way that we look at the lost tribes of the Amazon. That's how they viewed us, our ancestors. And Tacitus makes it clear that the Germanic tribes didn't have money. They didn't use money at all. Their form of payment was cows. That's why we have the word fee. Well, the word fee comes from the Germanic word fehu, which means cow. You didn't give money, you gave a cow. So what is the fee that you're charging? How many cows? How many cows for that house? They didn't use money. And Tacitus makes it very clear that when like the Greeks or the Romans would come and visit the Germanic tribes people, and they'd come with gold and silver, that the Germanic people would look at it like, what the hell am I supposed to do with this? And they would, one of the things they do is they give them like a goblet, like a silver goblet or a golden goblet. And they would take it and they'd put it on, the shelf, and then they would get out their wooden cup and they would drink out of their wooden cup. They didn't really know what the hell to do with it. And it says that they liked silver better because silver was shinier. They had no concept that silver, had less value than gold. They didn't even, So obviously this myth is written, it's written in 1000 AD, so it's written after. The Germanic tribes people adopted money and started using money for all of their stuff. So anyway, that's just a fun little side note there for you. But again, I find it ironic. I find it ironic that the people running the world and the people who, up until recently, and depending on who we're talking about, they saw themselves superior to everybody else. These were the guys 2,000 years ago that were the most primitive people on the planet, according to, all of the civilized societies. The irony, I can't escape that irony. It's just so, anyway. All right, so moving on. Steve, travesty question related to Oak Tree's question. How should we use precious metals outside of currency and technology? I don't know. I don't know why you guys are asking me these questions. I don't know. I don't know that I care. I'm more interested in the symbology surrounding it and how does it apply to us on a spiritual level. So maybe there's an answer to that question. I don't have it because it just kind of bounces off my head. I feel like I don't understand it. Susie Jotun's wife, question, do you think it was Gulveig's burnt heart that Loki ate? Somebody mentioned that myth. I'm not familiar with that myth. And somebody wrote me and, had an interpretation about it, trying to sort of argue with me that Loki is bad and Loki is fickle and all that. I didn't know the myth well enough to respond, so I didn't. But I don't know. I'd have to read the myth. I'd have to read the actual, because you can tell, the details in the myth are important. If you get one detail wrong, like for instance, I read this all over the net, that people equate Gullveig with Freyja. It doesn't say that. That is based on a false assumption and people jump to conclusions. It has nothing, it doesn't say that. Freja is not Gulveig. Unless there's something I'm missing. Unless there's a myth where it actually says that. It didn't say that in that part of the myth. Because otherwise it would have. Okay. Kara Smite, question. Last year I started meditating regularly and saw an entity. Okay, so you're the one that was asking me about the fear of entities. So I knew that. I could tell that that was part of the question. And, you know, I'm really, again, when it comes to your questions, I'm far more interested in what is the emotional agenda, what is the emotional need. And I tend to get frustrated, or I tend to get aggressive and psychoanalyze you if I can tell that you don't really know, or you're not telling me the emotional need why you want to ask me the question. So now I know you saw an entity. Obviously it frightened you. I stopped the practice because I got scared. I have restarted my practice this year and want to be prepared. If and when it happens again, do entities pose a real threat, or is it just mind tricks? I don't know. I don't know what practice you're doing. I don't, you know, this is why when it comes to, you know, what I do, let me get it up here. You know, people get on my case because they think I'm selling, you know, just on here to sell stuff to you, but astrology.thunderwizard.com. The meditation and the mantra and the ritual I give to somebody comes out of their chart. It's important to understand that when we're dealing with things like mantra, ritual, that everybody's different. So, you know, for instance, there are mantras out there that are safe. Om Namah Shivaya. That's a safe one for everybody. Everybody can practice that, and it's only going to help you. The Triambakam mantra, you know, those kinds of things. Everybody can do that. It's like taking vitamin C. It's good for everybody. But when you start getting into deities and specific deities, when you start getting into specific practices, you know, then you've got to know what you're doing. So, for instance, I don't know why meditation is making you see an entity. I don't know what you're not telling me what the entity is. Is it a shadow person? Is it a bright, shiny person? I don't even, again, I don't know enough to tell you whether or not it's a good or a bad thing. You want me to give you this blanket statement, you know, can they pose a threat? Is it a problem? I mean, I believe that the way to get through this life is to be fearless. But I don't think you should be stupid. You know, I'm not going to go into the wrong part of town and start, you know, shooting my gun in the air, right? I'm not going to be stupid about things, but I'm not going to waste my time being afraid of stuff. So I don't know. I don't know you well enough. I don't know what you do. You know, for instance, if you are somebody who does power plants, like if you did hallucinogens, or if you did marijuana, or if you did, I'll share something that happened to me not too long ago. So, as you know, last year, is it a year ago? It was like February, I think, February of 2017. I had I had surgery because I had an inguinal hernia. So it's you know, it's an outpatient thing, but it's fairly serious. And you know, they prescribe, you know, pain pills, and you know, I hear me talking about drugs, and I am really happy that they gave them to me because that was really painful. But as I was driving home, actually I was Ubering home, and I was on the phone because they didn't give me the prescription, and I had to get to you know, before the medication wore off, I had to get to the pharmacy to get the pain meds. And the Uber guy overheard me talking on the phone to somebody, and he said, you know, and you know, I'm coming out of, you know, this haze, so I didn't really hear everything he had to say, but he said that, and I didn't take him seriously. This is what's interesting. I didn't take him seriously, but he said that he had whatever, some kind of injury or something, and that he took pain pills, and he said he started seeing demons, and that he saw this dark spirit, and he said, you should be careful with that stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, people take pain meds every day. What the hell is wrong with this guy? And I didn't pay any attention to him. So anyway, long story short, I got pain meds, and I'm home after the whatever, and I don't know if it was the first night or the second night, and I only took half of what was prescribed. I didn't take the whole amount, because I didn't, for obvious reasons. I just wanted to take enough of the edge off so I could sleep. That's all I cared about. But I remember as I was falling asleep, I saw in my room a shadow figure with no head. A headless shadow figure standing in front of me. And I woke up. It scared me. And I am of the belief that that is the entity that is associated with opiates. And I think that is one of the reasons why opiate addiction is so horrible. I think there's an entity associated with that. People talk about power plants, and they talk about you're getting into the power plant, whether it's cannabis or whether it's ayahuasca or whatever. And what you don't understand is that, yes, you're going to get benefits from that earth entity. It's an earth spirit. It's a plant spirit, which means it gets its power from the earth. And there's all kinds of earth spirits that are running around. And earth spirits are not meant to vibe with humans. Doesn't mean we can't work with them. But doing a ritual, like I remember I won't say that. I'll take that back. I won't. That's information you don't need to know. But, when you're dealing with earth spirits, there's ways to do it safely. Consuming their essence is going to connect you to them, and you're not an earth spirit. You're a human spirit. Once you get into their world and they have control like that over you, they're going to give you power. They may give you visions. But now you're in a whole different world, and it's not where we belong. So, that stuff is short-lived. It saps all the energy out of you. It saps all of your life force energy out of you. Anyway, I'm convinced that was the entity associated with opiates. So going back to your question, does seeing an entity, is that good or bad? I don't know enough to tell you whether it's good or bad. My instinct is to say don't worry about it. But again, I don't know enough about you. I don't know what you're doing with your life. I don't know what your energy body is like. I don't know what practices it is that you're doing. There's nothing wrong with having, some caution. If when you meditate, you see something, it's either you're seeing something that's there all the time, or you're attracting something. And you could be doing a practice that's not right for you. This is why I teach this, qigong.thunderwizard.com. If you go there and you do the celestial qigong, that's going to drive away evil spirits. A lot of people want to bring spirits into their home, and they do rituals to bring the spirits into their home. You do this kind of stuff, you're going to drive them all away, except for the highest level ones, and those ones will never appear to you. They don't do that. They stay out of your business, but they're there. But the ones that show up and you see them in front of your face and all that, those are lower level spirits doing other stuff, and it's debatable whether or not that they might give you some power, or you might be able to use them for some spell or something, but ultimately they don't really give you, they don't give you what you need ultimately. So the short answer is I don't know enough. I would have to have a session with you. If you want a session with me, or I can ask you a bunch of questions, maybe I can help you. You can go to career.thunderwizard.com. Okay? All right, let's see if there's any more questions. Seems like there is. Question, what is the true spiritual meaning of gold? I already talked about that, so you can go back after this is archived and watch it from the beginning. I already talked about that. Do you, again, Sorsha de Adair, please put questions so I know you're asking me a question. Otherwise, I may miss it. Before you ask the question, write questions so I can see it. Do you have any suggestions for someone wanting to learn Seether and Galder? Books, sites, podcasts? Well, as a matter of fact, I do. You can go here. I have, as it so happens, a bunch of books on these subjects. You can go here. You can learn directly from me, from the bottom up. I will teach you the first steps in ritual, shamanism, runes. Okay? And you can go onto my channel, the thunderwizard.com YouTube channel, the free one. Go in there and put some time and effort into searching all of the 400 videos that I have and begin learning. This is what I'm doing here. This is what all this is about. Okay. Kara Smite, question. I just do a regular mindfulness meditation. It's just my being present in my mind, body, and emotions. No other mantras, archetypes, etc. I saw a half demon, half human entity. Again, I need to know more information. You know, just a regular mindfulness meditation, you may need some actual technique. You're probably seeing what's already there. So just not meditating isn't going to make it go away. I wouldn't worry about it. You know, fear isn't going to help you, but it means it's something within you at the very least that needs to be addressed. And I would recommend doing this, the Celestial Qigong. Because regular mindfulness meditation is great, but it doesn't really do anything. It doesn't, you know, in essence, if you do it right, it relaxes you, and then the energy body will empower itself, and your mind will kind of settle itself. And so it has use, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't necessarily have any power in and of itself. It's not going to, you know, do a whole heck of a lot. So that's why I do mantra and ritual and qigong and all that other stuff. So there's something in you on an unconscious level that has attracted this negative entity. Either you are projecting it out of your own unresolved unconscious issues, or you are attracting it out of your unconscious fear issues. It needs to be dealt with. There's something in your unconscious that needs to be dealt with. I would recommend that. I would also recommend getting a session with me. Because we need to find out what's going on. We need to find out what you're not aware of about, you know, there's something going on, because that stuff doesn't happen out of nowhere. Okay, we create that. Be happy, quests, must mean question. Quests. I overheard people talking about me in dream time. What does that mean? You had a dream where you heard people talking about you? See, now there's an assumption in there which I don't know is true. You are wanting me to assume that what you heard was actual, that it was a real thing. Because the way you said it, you heard people in the dream time. And I get it. That's a shamanic thing. Shamanic cultures talk about the dream time as much as it's as real as anything else. But dreams, there's all different kinds of dreams. There are actual spiritual dreams, and then there are dreams where you're experiencing your own unconscious fears. There are dreams where you're experiencing your own unconscious fantasies. And if I told you about all the stuff I dream about, we'd get a pretty good glimpse at some of the things that I'm trying to get in my life. So let's see here. Someone said I need to talk to Freya. Should my next step be to listen to your video on Freya? I don't know why you're asking me that. I would say, because I think my videos are good, that yeah, you should go watch my video. You should all go and watch all of my videos and buy all of my books and sign up at thunderwizard.com. That's what I want you to do. So yeah, I want you to do that. But does that mean that your dream has told you that that's what you're supposed to do? Instead of, you know, over spiritualizing it, I would just say, if you feel led to do it, go do it. Don't overthink it. Let's see here. What? Sorsha de Adair. Question. Do you have any suggestions for somebody wanting to learn Seether and Galder books? I think I already answered that, didn't I? Yeah. Go to michaelwilliamdenny.com, go to thunderwizard.com, and go to the thunderwizard.com YouTube channel and binge watch all of the videos. Start with the Thunder Wizard path. Karasmite, question. I do drink socially and sometimes smoke. You mean cigarettes or ganja? No. I've done marijuana 2 times in my whole life. So you smoke cigarettes and you've done marijuana 2 times in your whole life. You don't need to apologize. Don't waste your time apologizing. You do drink socially. I don't know what that means. A lot of people who say they drink socially means they get shit-faced. So one thing I would definitely say is it's time to stop doing that. If you've got some entity that shows up when you try to meditate, one of the things that's definitely going on is that your protective aura, which is your life force energy, is weak. Because that's one thing that entities look for. Entities cannot, you asked me, do I have to worry about entities? Entities cannot harm you, especially if you're intact. If you're emotionally intact, energetically intact, they can't touch you. There's nothing in the, you have this diamond steel thing called your aura, which no negative entity can touch. When you're connected to the soul and to, what Christians would say, if you're connected to God, but that mindset is accurate here. If you're connected to your soul and to yourself, nothing can touch you. So if when you go to meditate, something like that is showing up, it means it's already, it senses that there's some breach in your protective wall. So first thing, the obvious thing is, okay, what affects the aura? Alcohol definitely affects it. Definitely messes it up. I would stop. I'm not saying that everybody listening to me has to do this, but if you've got an entity, stop all alcohol, stop all mind-altering chemicals. Nicotine is also, doesn't help you either. Here's the thing: there are entities out there. There are ghosts, which are not people's spirits. We'll get into that another time. But there are ghosts and entities out there that are addicted. They're addicted to alcohol. They're addicted to meth. They're addicted to, and when you do that kind of stuff, they come looking for you. They want to slide inside your aura and experience that, and they'll push you to keep doing more, do more, do more. So it's not uncommon that an addict will have something hanging on to them, helping them stay in. So I'd get rid of all of that stuff. And look, it's just smart. You shouldn't be smoking. Come on. I'm not trying to, it's not a moral thing. It's not good for you. I would start with that. And then I would do celestial qigong. That will definitely get rid of any entities. And then if you have any emotional crises as a result of that, because it may bring up some stuff, then have a session with me or become an apprentice, and I can help you through that. I don't even know if I have any spots open. Be happy, question. Oh, I already answered that question. What is my perspective on numerology? I am not trained in numerology. I have an interest in it. So when I don't know something, I say I don't know. So I don't have enough knowledge to answer your question. Sorsha de der question. Can you share any insight into sleep paralysis and seeing entities during these episodes? That is something that can be seen in somebody's chart. For that, again, I would go here. Qigong.thunderwizard.com. Do celestial qigong. If you do celestial qigong, that will stop. I have suffered from that, and I know that I'm really out of sorts if I have that happen, because it'll happen. If I get out of whack, I will have sleep paralysis and I'll wake up screaming. And that used to happen all the time. I was a little kid. When I was a little kid, I would wake up to, not being able to move. Sleep paralysis is an actual real thing. It's something that the body does. I forget the word for it, but If we didn't have sleep paralysis, people would be getting up, walking around, jumping out of windows in their sleep. So it keeps you in the bed, keeps you from, keeps you from doing the stuff that's going on in your dream or your nightmare. So it's a real thing. And sleep paralysis sometimes is people waking up in the middle of a dream and they're having paralysis. When you have a nightmare, which may not be anything spiritual at all, it may just be you having, your unconscious fears coming up. When you have a nightmare, people want to wake themselves up. So they wake themselves up out of a nightmare, but they're still in sleep paralysis because that's the body protecting you from doing something stupid. And a lot of times when you wake up, you can't tell, what you're seeing is a hallucination from your dream. You're still dreaming, but your eyes are open and you're seeing the dream in front of you like a projection on a screen. So I don't want to over spiritualize everything. Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. So sleep paralysis, it's just what it is. So that's my first thought about that. If you honestly believe that there's something spiritual going on and you're being attacked by entities and you're seeing things during these episodes, then again, the same thing applies. Go onto my channel and watch about demons and demon possession. I was an exorcist for years, many years ago, and I stopped doing it because I came to the conclusion that the only way that an entity can get into your field or get into your life or oppress you or do anything is if you have an unconscious desire to be diverted from something that's even worse. So however fearful it is to see that, or imagine being in a possessed house where things are flying around and you're hearing voices and doors slamming. However frightening that is even less frightening than what it is you're really afraid of, which probably has something to do with fear or pain or some other emotional issue that you're avoiding. I've never run into somebody who has demon problems or spirit problems who doesn't have major unresolved emotional issues. And then we can, and the bottom line, it doesn't matter whether it's real or whether it's imagined, it doesn't matter. The cure for it is the same, which is you have to take full, complete responsibility for your life. You have to address any victim mentality that you have. And you may need to get help. You may need either to get counseling from like a psychiatrist or psychologist, or you may need to get spiritual counseling. But my suggestion for everybody who has any of those issues is this. Qigong, sorry, everything's backwards. Qigong.thunderwizard.com. Go there and do celestial Qigong. If you do that, that energy will drive away any negative spirit whatsoever, and it will give you power to focus on yourself. It will actually bring your unconscious stuff to the surface. So a lot of people do that and they can't continue with it because it brings up too much stuff for them. But that's the only way through it in my experience. All right, no more questions. I'll take a break here. I'll see if there's anything else I want to say. And if you have any questions, now is the time to put it up here before we move on. So I'll be back in a couple minutes. All right, so let's see. What do I want to say to wrap things up here? We got off into a bunch of other subjects. Yeah, there were some other things that I wanted to say, but didn't really have time to do it. I think I'm going to need to spend more time talking about mythology and going verse by verse with some of the mythology and explaining to you what's really going on. What I believe to be some of the underlying secret teachings that are there. I'll say this again, in the beginning I talked about two extreme ways to look at mythology. My view of mythology is that, true mythology, first off, the way you know something is real mythology is that it lasts the test of time. When you read something and it's no longer applicable, and you're not able, when you read it, it doesn't do anything for you, it doesn't make any sense to you, or you don't understand it, then it's probably not what I would consider to be a real myth. Real mythology stands the test of time, meaning, it doesn't matter how old the myth is, even if you're hearing a story that is from, thousands of years ago, you're still connected to it and wrapped up in it. And true mythology is not written by humans, in my opinion. True mythology is channeled information. It doesn't mean that there wasn't somebody who was writing something. I mean, there are some movies that are channeled. I think there's some, I think the Lord of the Rings movies, the books. Some people don't like the movies. I think the movies are great. Some people hate them. But the books definitely, I'd say, are channeled. But he didn't, go into that writing those books trying to channel information. He was just trying to, he was a writer trying to create entertaining stories. He actually did have a personal agenda where he wanted to create mythology for the British Isles. He did want to do that. He says that very clearly. But he gives some truth about the relationship, like especially, the relationship between the dwarves and the elves. He has an understanding about that could not have come from just him trying to think it up. He's giving very clear information about how the higher self and the lower self interact, and when they don't interact, what that is. I've talked about that. That I would consider to be mythology, channeled mythology. And I believe that when you are able to really understand the myths and implement them in your lives, that you will evolve. I also believe that the mythology in there has secret tips on things like qigong and meditation and rune work and ritual and that kind of stuff, but you have to know how to interpret the symbols in there. And I think even the people who wrote that may not have even known that that's what they were doing, that they were writing this coded information about things that can give you immortality and all that kind of stuff. So that's my view on mythology, and I think it's important that we in the West get out of our heads and hand them over to spiritual masters. And here's the thing about it: you can give this same mythology, you can give Norse mythology. If I were to hand this to an East Indian yogic master, if I were to hand this to them and say, what does this mean? They would know. If I were to hand it to a Taoist master and say, what does this mean? They would know. Same an African master. And I know that because that's what happened with me. When I trained and I learned how to understand the hidden meaning in Vedic myth and in Taoist mythology, and on top of that, this is why I say hand it to a master, somebody who actually has spiritual, practical experience with energy work and meditation. They'll have a physical, it won't be an intellectual understanding, it'll be a physical understanding. And you hand them these myths and you say, what does it mean? They'll be able to tell you without ever knowing anything about that culture. That's true mythology. And hopefully I can do more of that with this stuff later on as we go. Anyway, so I think with that I'll shut up unless there's any questions here. Be happy question. Thank you for tonight. Do you have a regular schedule and time when you go live? I don't. I haven't disciplined myself enough to do that. I like having my freedom and doing whatever the hell I want to do when I want to do it. But I do tend to come on certain times. You can look for me Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. Those are the 3 days that I will come on more often than not, because I don't have any clients on Saturday and Sunday. And I will try and come on around 6 o'clock in the evening Pacific time. I sometimes will come on earlier, like 3 or 4 in the afternoon if I want to do something later. I will sometimes come on, the middle of the week. So I can come on at any time. I've come on any day of the week, but those are the times I normally come on. And I know that there are ways to set up your preferences in YouTube so that you can be, notified by email. So your phone will go off and say, "Oh, Thunder Wizard's going live." So I know that I don't know how to do that, but I know you can do that, and I think that's the best way to do it at the moment. So that's it. Karis might ask a question here. What would be the one spiritual rule teaching you personally like propagated in the world as it is today? I don't know right now. I can't really come up with the one thing. I say that a lot. I'll say the most important thing. I say that all the time, and I say it about everything. Whatever it is I'm thinking about that I'm excited about in the moment is the most important thing. So you'll just have to keep watching, and I'm sure I'll say that at one point. I'll tell you kind of where I've been coming from with this, and I'll end with this tonight. Last night and tonight, my motivation for doing this is I want to talk about and teach about emotional agendas and assumptions. I think that is definitely one of the most important things, and I would definitely say, if it's not the most important thing, it is definitely indispensable for spiritual and personal development. To be able to know what you're feeling and to know how your feelings are driving your beliefs is absolutely crucial. And if you're not able to be to look at yourself and know what it is that what you're really feeling, and why you're doing what you're doing from an emotional level, then you can't. If you can't do that, it's going to be hard for you to be able to, take a look at what the best course of action is for you spiritually as well as anything else. I put them in this order. You first have to know what your emotional agendas are. Then you take a look and see what your assumptions are. So, again, to give you an example about assumptions and how dangerous they are, Christianity is founded on assumptions. And I'm not a Christian anymore, but I was for years. And there was this thing called the 4 spiritual laws. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. I don't hear about it so much now, but this was a big thing back in the 70s, in the 80s. And if you wanted to go proselytize and convert people to Christianity, you might have this booklet with you called the 4 spiritual laws. And it starts with laying the foundation for assumptions. And it's brilliant. Once you ingest those assumptions, then somebody can slide Christianity right in there. That's why it's perfect. I don't remember the exact order of it, but it starts with, you are born sinful. I mean, it's just a fact. They come up with this fact. Now, that's easy for us to accept, especially in Western society, because whether people are raised in a Christian environment, they've been infused with this belief that they are sinful and that there is such a thing as sin and punishment. Whether they're religious or not, they're still programmed to respond to that. I mean, you take that to people who live out in the middle of the forest, and you start talking about it. They go, "Well, why? Why am I? What did I do to?" They start asking logical questions because it's not part of their cultural framework. They haven't been, they haven't been infused with that. But Westerners have. So you say, you are sinful and separated from God, and people may not like it, but they accept it. That God is perfect, and again, I'm paraphrasing. I don't remember exactly what it said. God is perfect, and you are imperfect, and therefore you can never reach God. If you do not know God, you will burn in hell. You will burn in hell forever. Jesus is perfect, and only perfection. God will only accept perfection, and Jesus is perfect. Jesus died for your sins. If you accept him into your heart, God will then see you as his perfect son, and he won't see your sin anymore, and you will go to heaven. Those are assumptions, and they have verses to back it up. And the assumption there is that the Bible has something, is a source for truth. And so, all of these are laying assumptions. But once you accept that first assumption that you are sinful, and that God hates sin. I think that's part of it. God hates sin, meaning God hates you. If you accept that assumption, every single thought you have from then on will be built upon that assumption that you are sinful and God hates you. So that means your entire life will be built on a bunch of very false assumptions about yourself, about the universe, and about your relationship to the universe. This is how important assumptions are. Now, what ends up happening with that assumption is it creates an emotional agenda. The emotional agenda is then you become fearful. There's no way you can accept that without going into deep fear and going into your reptilian brainstem, which is fight or flight. You go straight into, you can't think straight, your emotions don't work right, you can't process things, you're in, even if it's not noticeable, you are in a very deep state of survival. You're in survival mode because you are going to go to hell and God hates you. And so you become desperate and fearful. And all of the choices that you make, the politics that you choose to accept, the way you treat your finances, the way you treat other people, they will all be infused with this false assumption that has put you into a state of fear. So that's just to give you one example. This is why it's so frustrating when we start talking about things like politics and all that kind of stuff, because people don't, in religion, people are not able to discuss these things from a place of awareness. They are operating from an emotional agenda, and that's why they get angry, and that's all of that, because their emotional agendas are there. And once your emotional agendas are going, you can't see straight. You can't look at things objectively. So it's really important to be able to step back and go, okay, what are my emotional agendas here? What am I afraid of? What is it that I want? And then you'll be able to see how your brain is trying to mess with the truth and mess with your interpretation of things to fit within that emotional agenda. Okay, I could make some more examples, but I won't. I've taken up too much of your time already. All right, so that's it. I don't see any more questions here, so I'm going to leave you guys with that. And, if you have any myths that you want me to look at in the Norse tradition, I will be happy to do that. Don't bring in other myths that I'm not familiar with. But if you have any other myths in the Norse tradition that you'd like, you can put in the comments section of this video. Not the Q&A, but the comments section. Let me know, and I'll take a look and see if there's something of value in there for me to help with. All right, so that's it, everybody. I look forward to our next encounter.